Previously on Awkward GM.
I'm gonna take this Mage Awakening icon and I'm going to put it in hate.
On the internet, the people are represented by two separate but equally nerdy dorks. Chun chun!
I'd like to thank Drew from Occultist Anonymous for agreeing to do this. You can find a link to his channel in the description below. Also, if you have any ideas who's winning this court battle, please leave them in the comments.
Chun chun!
So, back to Mage issues. This next set of issues are my personal ideological issues, I say, or mainly these are the problems I've hit with when I've used Mage in various scenarios. So, personal ideological issues with Mage, these are the issues that I sort of butt my head against when I try to run Mage. As I've said before, I run Mage mainly in a cross-splat zoo-type game where they're not just mages, they're vampires, werewolves, demons, mummies, etc. So the first charge in this regard, we have Chronicles of Darkness's design philosophy was built around cross-compatibility, or at least more cross-compatibility than Old World of Darkness. But Mage seems to have been built around with the idea that mages should be the supernatural. The idea of mages are... Everyone has their own worlds that they are functioning in, but mages are everywhere, like able to go into everything and stick their finger into everyone's pie, as it were.
This is going to be the first time where I'm just going to flat out disagree with you. Mages do go out of their way to poke and meddle, right? But vampires do the same thing. Werewolves do the same thing. Geists maybe don't. Mummies can get involved. Hunters definitely do. And Beast definitely does. Changeling and Geist are kind of off on their own. Promethean is kind of off on their own. Deviant is just running for their lives. But no, the big three especially totally metal because all three of them are very integrated into, from the Mage perspective, Sleeper Society. They're all involved with stuff. Especially when you look at the mage orders, not necessarily individual mages, but mages as a whole. The exarchs rule over all of reality and are keeping sleepers under the lie. And that includes, in many cases, hiding away the even existence of vampires and werewolves. They don't want people to know about that kind of stuff. But mages inherently are tied to those mortal people. They have families, they have contacts, and this is one of those things that I've run into, and I've brought it up before. If you have mages running around only interacting with other mages, and they have no interaction with sleeper friends, they don't have neighbors, they don't have family, you're missing out on a big portion of Mage. Because at that point, you have turned them into these supernatural beings that have no connection to actual reality, the mortal side of reality. But no, mages are probably the most human of them, especially because it's very easy to have somebody bother them. Now, you could have mages who I'm going to live in my ivory tower and separate away from all of society, but literally every order has some reason to be involved with sleepers. On the bad guy side, with Exarchs and Seers of the Throne, you're oppressing them. With the Silver Ladder, you're trying to build them up and find people and nudge them into awakening. Guardians of Veil are protecting people from awakening who should never awaken. Mysterium is stealing away magic items from sleepers, etc., etc.
Yeah, this one is definitely one that I've had players say to me that they don't like the idea of. So one of my players said, they're a big Geist Sin Eater fan, and they said, I really don't like Moros because I don't like the idea that there are mages who are like sort of stepping into the Sin Eater territory, and
Sure.
and they've also said like similar stuff about there's a Promethean one that also sort of steps into ghost territory because the way they're created is by being covered in ectoplasm and thrown into the Twilight. And I'm not really against that aspect of it. It's usually in that regard I'm like, okay, you have these types of this type of crossover with these splats, that means you can have them integrate more in a cross splat fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So you have I'm doing a video later on the Wild Hunt Gangrel, and they have the Dead Wolves, which are a Gangrel subfaction that are based around werewolves. Like they hang out with werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
Gangrels always hung out with werewolves before, so I like that type of crossover. But when it comes to mages in like a holistic sense, it feels like a lot of them are stepping on toes, as it were. Like you've got they some of the abilities they have, like you would say like maybe Sin Eaters are very ghost centric, and then suddenly the mage is coming around being like, oh, that ghost that was having a problem resolving their anchor, I snap my fingers, it doesn't exist anymore or something. I don't know.
That's a bit much.
That's a bit much. I over exaggerate
Right.
for the
No,
point,
I
I
understand.
guess.
You understand. You exaggerate for the point. Well, I mean, the same could be said about hunters. There's
Mhm.
a bunch of different hunter groups that specify and get involved in stuff. The Council of Bones literally does stuff with ghosts. The
Mhm.
fun thing, and we'll use Geist because that one is near and dear to my heart. It's one of the first splats that shows up in the Rookery, and well, just after the werewolves. But and now we're running our World War One Geist game, so I love Geist, and it's terrific. Geist and mages should be best buddies.
They should.
A mage with Death 1 can create plasm super easily. The same plasm that Sin Eaters use. Literally all day, mage can go, here you go, and just pass plasm all day to a Geist. Now, that said, in a crossover game, you may want to adjust that, and that's where Player's Guide to the Contagion Chronicle brings some stuff up. But yeah, they should be best friends, especially because there's a bunch of stuff that both of them cannot do. For instance, there is a ceremony, Dead Phone or something like that. I cannot remember the name of the ceremony for Geist, but it gives them a object that allows them to call up and down from the underworld. Mages would need to have space at least, and then they could maybe use mind for some telepathic communication across dimensions, but they'd probably need to have death to cross the barrier out of the underworld. Meanwhile, the Geist is over here like, yeah, that's about like 4 XP for me, and I can do it all day, every day. What's your problem? Like, they all have very specific parts that they are good and better at, where they can team up and be better as a whole. And that is one thing in the crossovers that you should lean on. And notably, if you are running a zoo campaign, this is more for everybody out there. Don't have if you have somebody who's playing a Geist, don't have a Moros mage. It's have them do something else. They could pick up the Death Arcana, but you don't want them to literally be the antithesis. Heck, if you have a vampire in the Chronicle, I'd probably say don't do a Moros, though that's not nearly as bad. But yeah, and it's definitely a level of specialization that you have to be careful of.
Yeah, one issue that did come up with one of my players at some point that was sort of separate. It was a weird situation that we had. A lot of my players, when they come up with their character concept, they have this idea of like for Deviant, they might not know their origin. They might not know what they are. They that's their mystery that they need to solve. And since Mage love mysteries, they'll look at the person, use time magic to scroll back and be like, "This is what you actually are. Here's all like this. Here's your backstory in book form. You can read through it or something."
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean,
I
that is very specifically a time mage who is going to need a fairly high potency, because you're talking about somebody who is vastly different from who they were. And
yeah.
they totally could do that. And that's where you, similar to the previous, topics, you have to have a fairly frank conversation with your players, because that is stepping on people's toes. The flip side, right, is you have a deviant. Well, you don't want the deviant to go around and expose that the mage is a mage to the wife and kids. Well, whoa, hang on. This is a secret. I don't need that exposed to everybody. Same kind of move, right? Out of character, in character. And it could be handled in character. The time mage who goes, "Ooh, you have a wacky, wild origin story," casts a spell, sees this guy's past, and starts to say things. And the deviant is like, whoa. Don't just tell me this. You can do that out of character or in character. It's like, that's super invasive. How dare you do that? And now you have a great spot where you can set up in character, "Hey, we need to have boundaries. You just cast a spell on me without permission. Like, you want to do that to some bad guy that we're stopping? Cool, but you can't do that to me."
Exactly.
And hey, if you really need to know, fantastic. Find out and then shut up about it. I didn't ask you. It's like,
Thank you.
somebody going on ancestry.com and putting your name in, right? "Oh, let me tell you about
Oh
your
yeah.
great great grandfather and some of the terrible things. He's got his whole like criminal record up there." I'm like, dude, I didn't ask for that. You don't need to tell me that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough.
Right. I mean, same
I
thing,
I
because it comes up a lot. Mind magic can be super invasive. And for some mages, and we did this with Into the West, well, it's just your surface thoughts. It's the same thing as if I'm just really good at reading your face, or just kind of guessing what you're going to say. I'm not actually reading your mind.
Mhm.
But it's like, well, dude, it's just invasive. I'm asking you not to do that. And
Yeah.
if that becomes a problem, right? Because that's the same thing with even friends, right? "Hey, I'm playing a video game and I'm trying to beat this level," and somebody shows up, just picks up the controller and goes, "Oh, see, beat it for you." And it's like, well, no, that was a challenge for me. If you trivialize it, it means nothing to me now. Same kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And you can do that, handle it in character or out of character. Personally, I suggest you handle it out of character, figure out what you want to do, and then handle it in character for good story beats.
Yeah. It's a lot of issues can come up, especially with a lot of more powerful type characters where you need to talk to the player and set up those boundaries beforehand or even during game if you didn't realize it was happening
Yep.
initially.
X card, man, stuff like
Yeah.
that. That use safety tools, kids.
Yeah. Second charge of paradox doesn't seem to be much of an issue if sessions are spaced out with a few
Jen,
days
Jen!
of downtime in between. I can even say it doesn't seem like that much of an issue if scenes are spaced out enough. Because so one thing that came up in my last session that I streamed, um, the mage characters kept asking me, "Have we finished the scene? Is this a new scene?" before they cast a spell. And I kept having to say, "No, it wasn't." Because what they were looking for was a way to reduce paradox,
Mm-hmm.
because paradox resets when a new scene starts.
Yeah,
And
the cumulative paradox bonus. Mm-hmm.
so how do you deal with that
Exactly as you
if you're
did. If the scene has not changed, and this is a very important thing, and I like to use the movie kind of view of a scene. A scene is not necessarily we have a conversation in the kitchen and then we walk down the hall and we start to talk in the office. That's not a new scene. You've continued the conversation. The same thing could be said. Go watch any movie. A conversation starts, they're having it at location A, and then we skip the intervening time where they're sitting in the car and they're still talking, and we arrive at the location where they're going to be on lookout for the bad guys, and they're still talking and discussing things. And there has not been a clear break. That's the same scene, right? Yeah. Now you could have the same kind of thing happen, but there's a scene break. You could have, okay, we need to go do this. Okay, you go get this stuff. I can go do this thing, and we separate. And then we have, the Batman logo, right? And now we're in a new scene, and now we're over here. But if it has flowed naturally, we're still in the same scene. Because remember that the paradox is accumulative on the player, on that character. It's not paradox floating around in the air or anything like that. It's something that is affecting them. If they're still in that scene, nah. You're still there, bro. It doesn't matter. And that's the reason we use scene, not hours or days. We talk about scenes and chapters. Occasionally that does come down into hours and days. But if it's still the same scene, if you're still like for instance, you're exploring a warehouse.
I'm sorry, I got a notification. Can you repeat that just last second?
No problem.
So we don't do hours in scene. We don't do hours
and days.
We do scenes. We do scenes.
Yep.
Sorry.
No. Do you want me to continue? Start from there or continue from there?
Continue from there if you can.
Yeah. And because we have that kind of break, because the game is narrative, so if you are letting people go, oh yeah, you walked into this warehouse and you started investigating, you cast a spell, and now we're farther into the warehouse and that's a new scene. It's not. It is a continuation. We've moved forward, but we're still in that same scene. Think about, again, movie stuff. Think of the script, right? Scene XYZ. We have a shot, the establishing shot. They're in the warehouse. They're investigating. They're moving through the warehouse. They're exploring. They're having a talk with each other. They confront the big bad guys. That's an entire scene, as long as it is continuing and flowing. When the bad guy is dealt with and runs off in his helicopter and you'll never catch me, that's the end of the scene. And we pick up later back at the police station. Where did he go? Now we're in a new scene. But that entire warehouse thing, whether in the movie or at the table, it takes 5 minutes or an hour, it's a scene. So if you let up on players and go, oh yeah, this is a new scene. Yeah, the paradox doesn't accumulate and they're not penalized for overreaching.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been trying to be cracking down more on that, but it can be difficult when players are like, but a scene is in Mummy, a scene is an hour, so I can, or in the core rulebooks it says a scene is an hour. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't really left the scene, even if it has been maybe 2 hours or something.
Yep.
You've been investigating this haunted mansion. It's going to take more than an hour to do all the rooms and check everything.
Yep.
If you guys are actively waiting an hour for your paradox to go down so that things are easier, that's when the ghosts come out and try and attack you because you're not.
Time progresses forward whether or not you're doing something. To use the core book, or not the core book, the Mage book to describe it, the storyteller from page 215, if anybody is trying to follow along at home, the storyteller frames the scene describing what's going on. It's up to the players to resolve the events or conflict. A scene might be played out in turns, progress in real time, or skip forward depending on dramatic necessity. As in, we're having a conversation here and then we dramatically skip forward to the warehouse, still the same scene. Chapter, which is the next tier up, is the collection of scenes that happen over one game session. So that you might have one scene that lasts an entire chapter. You may have 4 scenes in one chapter.
That's crazy to think of.
I mean, people do it in D&D all the time, right? You sit down, we're gonna have combat, we're gonna fight right where we picked up, and we're gonna pick up where we left off. Have the big dramatic fight. Oh, finally done. That was 2.5 hours. Okay, let's have a little chat and we'll continue later. In game time, what happened? 30 seconds of combat, 10 rounds.
Yeah,
or 5 rounds, I think. 30 seconds.
Reminds me of 4th edition.
Yes.
This is the next charge. Paradox seems easy to mitigate or ignore, as the only risks that seem to increase it are there's at least one sleeper around, you're casting with too much reach, or you've casted multiple times in a scene.
Well, you've overreached and cast because to clarify a rule, because it can be a little confusing. The cumulative paradox only matters if you actually provoke paradox. So if you have an accumulated 4 paradox, but your next spell doesn't provoke paradox at all, it doesn't overreach, there's no sleepers, that cumulative paradox doesn't affect you, because it's only cumulative added to the paradox pool. If there is no paradox pool because you did not provoke paradox, then it doesn't happen. That is something for you folks at home to remember. But
so to clarify, if I cast a spell and my paradox pool is only a chance die and I do another spell, it's still a chance die? Or is there a way to have a paradox pool that's 0?
Yeah, it's totally possible to have it 0. If you don't overreach at all, there's no paradox.
Really? So I always thought baseline you have a chance die for paradox.
Nope.
No?
Nope. You either have no paradox whatsoever, or you have 1 die. Now, you can reduce that 1 die down by reducing it, which reduces it down to a chance die, but you can totally have a spell that doesn't provoke any paradox whatsoever, at which point there's no paradox. So that's where you're casting within your reach. It's not obvious magic to a sleeper. If there's no sleeper, you don't even have to worry about that.
Gotcha.
So
it does seem like it's easy to mitigate.
It is very easy to mitigate. A lot of people look at paradox as being this big scary thing that's going to keep mages from casting spells. Paradox is not something to prevent mages from casting spells. It limits how much and how big they can be. You have to be careful about being obvious to sleepers. You have to be careful about not overreaching. But if you're not doing the 2 of those things, you can get away with a lot. I mean, literally, step down an alleyway, look left, look right, and cast a spell, and poof, teleport away. If there's nobody there to see you, you can teleport in the middle of Manhattan.
Man. Crazy.
Yep.
Jump into a dumpster and teleport.
I mean, 100%. If you're using sympathetic range, so you don't even need to see anything, hop into a dumpster and disappear.
Crazy.
Now, you may cause some quiescence and some breaking points if somebody goes to open that dumpster and go, hey, wasn't there a guy here? And they start looking around and you've disappeared. Not a problem. Now, if they watch you jump into the dumpster and you disappear, and then they go and check the dumpster and you're gone, now you're talking about quiescence and dissonance, and you may have to deal with an active hubris.
Okay. That would be someone I feel like I would get into an argument with a player over that, where they're like, hey, it's not my fault they decided to open up the dumpster lid.
No, because, and as we go back, wisdom is not a morality thing. It's, did you think about the full actions that you took or are going to take and the consequences thereof?
But this feels like, did you ever play Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2? No?
Oh, KOTOR. Yes, I did play KOTOR.
Yeah, so the second one with Kriya. you encounter a person who asks for change, and if you give them change, she says, "Oh, you gave them change, and then they used it to buy drugs, and then died from an overdose." And then if you like convince them to make better of their life, they end up trying to do stuff better, but end up dying because they decided to rob a bank or something. And then the third option is throw them into a pit, and it's just like, well, you did it, like you're just evil there. But like if your player hides in a dumpster, they look around, no one's around, they hide in a dumpster, they disappear, and someone rounds the corner that they didn't know about, who saw the dumpster lid shake or something, and they're like, okay, the guy obviously went in there, then checks it. Is that an act of hubris?
Well, and again, that's where you have to get into what is obvious magic, right? Because we're talking about maybe he went in there, right? Or I think he went in there. You're cool. I watched him climb into that dumpster, and now he's no longer in that dumpster. But if it's a maybe, if it's a question of it, then the person can be like, I could have sworn, maybe he went down somewhere else. As soon as there is something that allows the sleeper, because remember, the big issue here is we're talking about the sleeper being confronted with obvious magic. If they have something where they can go, oh, no, I must have missed him, or he went down a different alley, or he ducked into one of these doors. Maybe I didn't even see that dumpster close. That was just a figment of my imagination. As soon as they have any kind of out like that, their mind is going to use it. The lie is going to reassert itself. Capital L, the lie. And they're going to be like, yeah, never mind. I didn't see anything.
Okay. The next charge is Mine Arcana.
Dun dun!
Specifically in regards to Mage Sight. Seems like if you were to have Mine Arcana and you use Mage Sight, you could use it to identify any thinking creature, even if they are in Twilight or invisible.
Nope.
Tell me why not.
Sure. It's super easy. Mind Sight, as described, active Mind Sight, detects the presence of thinking beings and allows the mage to tell at a glance if someone is asleep, comatose, awake, meditating, or projecting out of his body or into the astral. The mage is also aware when a character she observes gains or spends willpower. Nothing in here says they have the ability to perceive into Twilight.
Okay. That's good to know. I have definitely had players say there's a just because something has some level of thought, even if it is artificial or very minor, that they say that the Mage Sight can work on that in some way.
If you need to really smack them with, this is what the book says, you point them to the top of 91, for those of you following along at home. Her sight won't let her see through walls or perceive entities and objects in a state of Twilight. It will not allow you to perceive entities in Twilight. Let's come back down to mine. Detects the presence of thinking beings. You can't do it. Now, if you have the 2-dot attainment from Death, which says the mage can see ghosts and souls in Twilight when using active Mage Sight with Death, now you can see into Twilight and spot the ghosts and recognize that they are thinking beings. And now you can start to get past. Now you start throwing out clashes of wills to see if you can actually perceive a ghost that's trying to hide in Twilight.
Now I have the question here, because as a Demon the Descent fanboy that I am, which Mage Sight allows you to see angels in Twilight?
Technically, none of them as presented in Mage the Awakening. That said, Player's Guide to the Contagion Chronicle asks, Demon, what arcana can I use to study demons and angels and protect against their powers? And so that is all in here. And
Is it
notably,
Prime?
Fate plus Prime Unveiling. So it's not an attainment. You don't get to use active mage sight. You actually have to cast a spell. Allows mages to see angels in Twilight.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I've not had that situation come up yet, but I feel like it has been dangerously close several times. The what was the other one? So now here's a side question. This is getting into like subreddit, Discord conversations I've seen. The question being, does AI count as mind?
No.
Nope. Simple.
I mean, you can talk about AI, but unless you're actually getting into actual real AI, a thinking computer that is so advanced it is actually capable of thought, not programmed pathways, then maybe. So if you're playing a sci-fi game and you have decided as a table, yes, AI are a thing, then yes, mine could see that as a thinking being. But you're talking about the levels of cognition and awareness like Commander Data from Star Trek.
Makes me feel like I should be playing a deviant that's Zeta from the Zeta Project and be like, it's sufficiently advanced, but it does not actually have free will
Yep.
in the same sense. But and then the last question, are there any in regards to the Mine Arcanum, are there any creatures you can think of, any monsters, horrors, or any splats that you can think of that don't have a mind but are still threats to mages?
Anything that is
Are
instinctual.
like instinctual, so beasts and such. Animals.
I lean heavily into mind is the realm of thinking, questioning beings. I would go so far as to say rank 1 and technically rank 0 ghosts and Goetia and spirits, maybe angels, though I haven't read up much on them, would probably not come up as thinking beings. Rank 2s, you start to question, they might be aware. But rank 3 and above tends to be where we start to see independent thought and reactions. Ghosts at rank 1 are just kind of stuck in a loop. Ghosts at rank 2 are a little bit more aware, but aren't necessarily 100% sure that they're dead. Rank 3 and above, which is technically Geists, are very aware that they are dead and are dealing with their new existence.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I appreciate you elaborating on that.
And again, that's one you bring up at the table and go, all right, what are we going to say? Because if you do want to say, hey, the Mind Arcana can recognize anything with brain waves, which don't bring science into Mage, don't do it. It's bad. But if that's what you're going to use as your litmus test, prepare for that Mage being overwhelmed with all sorts of thinking beings. And, or it might be OP. But that's something you all need to discuss at your table.
I do appreciate there was I'm assuming you've probably played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Nope.
You have not?
Well, I technically played far enough to walk up to some folks hanging out at a campfire, and then I walked up a side thing, and there was some gunfighting in a drug shack or something like that, and I got kind of frustrated at the game, and I tapped out.
I've played it a lot, but I'll talk to you off camera about it. But and specifically, there is a situation where there is a guy who's studying vampires, and he's like, okay, we know they burn up in the sun. What if we flood the room with UV light? doesn't do anything. That's weird. I wonder why it's not UV rays, and they're trying to like pin it down. And I feel like the same can be applied to Mage. It can be applied to other splats as well, but the idea that there's
Mage lives
science
in symbolism.
yeah, science can add to stuff, but it can't really explain it all.
Oh, science is the lie, capital L. Like, nope, that's just keeping you from understanding the world and what the power of Mage and Supernal is. It's all about symbolism and the supernal symbols being brought into our reality. That's one of the reasons why mages can make sunlight, but they have to specifically make sunlight. They can't just make bright light. They need to go out of their way to make sunlight and zap a bunch of vampires. But if they just make bright light, then it's just bright light, but they have to cognizantly make sunlight.
And I think there's even in Changeling they have artificial sunlight abilities where it states for vampires it doesn't do aggravated damage, but it does do lethal damage to them because it's mimicking sunlight, but it's not the same.
Actual sunlight, sure.
Yeah. Okay, next charge, skipping the abyssal one because we already did that. This charge is difficult to make sure spells players are casting are adhering to the complicated casting rules. Now I do use there is a mage casting app online.
Sorry, some got stuck in my throat there.
Was that real or was that fake?
I mean, it was real, but yeah, it was fake. No, the Void State website that people use, whoever made it, thank you for doing it. It is terrific for learning how to do spell casting. But if you lean on it, and there's also some problems on the website, if you lean on it, it is like not learning to do your times tables 1 through 10. Right. I mean, for me in California, I learned 1 through 12. I think other people learn 1 through 15. Regardless, if you fail to do that and you have to get out your calculator all the time to do that kind of stuff, you're going to slow things down. Now, that said, for Joe Schmo, for me in my daily life, and I'm going to do some quick math, you better believe I'm going to bust out my phone and be like, real quick, let me just... 8 times 6 is still 54, right? Oh, no, it's 48. Shit. But that's fine. But if you were to do that every day, all day at your day job, where your day job is doing multiplication and you're relying on a calculator rather than memorizing your 10 by 10, your 12 by 12 grid, you're going to slow things down and you won't actually learn the system. You can watch The Rookery. There's 160 episodes, and you can watch how much faster we get. We never use Void State, but we did use a Roll20 macro that I built to just kind of place down all our modifiers, talk about what reach we're spending real quick, real easy. And we got so fast to the point now that at least myself and a couple other of the team who are more mathematically comfortable can just go, okay, so I've got this, I'm going to take 2 steps here, 3 steps there, that's minus 10, so I'm going to roll 8 dice. And I go, okay. And some of that is a trust thing, that you do have to establish, but the complication of Mage is, the spellcasting system at least, actually comes down to 2 sets of different math. How much reach are you spending and how much free reach do you have? That's one equation that does not affect the other. And then you have your starting dice pool, Gnosis plus Arcana. Okay, what negatives are you taking? And then what yantras are you adding onto it? And all that is basic arithmetic. Like literally addition and subtraction. A lot of people try to blow it out of proportion, but I'll be honest, I do more addition and subtraction in a Pathfinder character. But the difference, of course, is you're having to recalculate every time. You got to get the reps in. Yeah. If you're playing a zoo campaign where you have one mage, you have to rely on that mage actually knowing their math and how to do stuff.
Yeah. in a zoo campaign, no GM. I will put out a challenge to GMs to keep track of every rule. I lean a lot on my players to make sure that they have their rules.
Any TTRPG. Matt Colville talks about it all the time. It's like, well,
Mhm.
what does this ability do? I don't know. What's it say? Okay, what's that sound like? Okay, so that's what it does. Cool. I haven't heard of that ability. I haven't played a ranger before. I don't know what that ability is. What's it say? Okay. It is on the player to know what they're doing. That's it. Spellcasting, highly recommend for mage players out there. If you are trying to figure stuff out and you're trying to keep track of it, set up an Excel sheet or Google sheet, and you can track all your spells and do some really quick math. You can set up some basic equations. I've seen at least one Google sheet floating out there where you can say, these are the spell factors I'm doing, tell me my dice pool. And you can do that much faster than clicking and sliding through in Void State.
There's a game that I really liked playing that I haven't really gotten a chance to play as much, called Through the Breach, which is based off of the war game Malifaux. And one of the things they do for their spellcasting, it's very similar to Mage the Awakening, I feel. It's very customizable. You have your basic, this is what the spell looks like how it's cast, and then you have additional things you can toss onto it to modify it for additional targets, increased damage, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they explain it in the book is you have this in your grimoire, whatever that form takes, and you write those spells out, figure out what they are, and then you can cast them, and you can always sort of mix and match them as you see fit. But a good idea is to have the skeleton of the spells that you use most often figured out,
Mm-hmm.
and then figure out what modification you're going to switch out the most. So if it's multiple targets versus a single target, that's something you can easily just say, okay, I'll calculate everything else, I'll leave that not calculated, and then just put underneath, oh, it's a +1 to the target number if I target 2 people instead of 1, or something like that. I told one of my players, hey, maybe this will help you organize your spells more for Mage the Awakening, and they were very much against it.
I mean,
because they said, that's not how Mage the Awakening works.
Sure it is. Gnosis plus Arcana, plus or minus your spell factors, which, by the way, you only go up to, you have 4 or 5 spell factors, which all are in -2 increments, and that's it. And then you're going to add in your yantras of your +1s or +2s. And those you're only going to do...
No, I'm the lawyer sweating.
Oh yeah. But I also had to look something up anyway, so I was like, I can't remember what that.
Yeah, no worries. Take it.
Yeah. So yeah,
Theo, a little bit of. It's a little.
There you go. But yeah, I mean, yantras at max, you get 6 yantras, and that's if you're a level 10 Gnosis mage. Generally speaking, you're going to tap out around Gnosis 5 or 6, which is you have 4 yantras, which means at max, you're talking about 4 sources of +1, +2 bonuses, except for rare occasions where you might get something larger. And you're going to have your regular ones that you use. Your shadow name is going to be the same number for most of the game. Your go-to yantras, your dedicated magical tool, they're all going to provide the same bonuses. There's not a whole bunch. It's all 1s and 2s, and 90% of the time it's a +1.
Unless shadow name's a +2, right?
Shadow name depends on how many dots you have in the merit and whether or not you have the Cabal theme. So I think that total gets up to +4.
I feel like if I'm taking a merit, I'm taking that merit.
Yes. If you don't take shadow name, I am going to judge you harshly.
That's I definitely at some point I need to go over all the merits that are must-haves
for all the splats. And it's like, listen, hang on. Well, welcome to Chronicles of Darkness. Let's talk about some things that you probably want to pick up.
Yeah, professional training. If you're
so good, so good,
so good, so broken. Anyway, but all these are good points. It's definitely something that needs to that is something that you learn over time, and hopefully, if you're playing Mage for a long period of time, you'll pick things up.
I mean, I'll go ahead and do it. Mage players, learn to cast spells. It's your job. Yeah.
Yes, do it. I when I did Dungeons and Dragons, I took out a timer a couple of times, and I or stopwatch, and I checked to see how long it took to do combat each turn, and we had like 10 players, and I said I had to look to the GM, and I said, "You can't have 10 players." And he's like, "Why?" I said, everyone's turn is taking 15 minutes because they're trying to figure out what spell or attack or enemy to attack, and they're arguing with everyone else. It becomes
It's mayhem.
impossible to do. Mayhem, yeah. This is why I like small groups of players. You don't have that happen as much. Okay, next charge. I'm not sure if we talked about this before, but this next charge is the limitations of spellcasting are not called out in a unified place, such as how far back in time time Arcana can travel back to, or if spells work on abyssal entities. And the example I have here that is one where I had a mage player argue to me that Sleep of the Just works on entities that don't sleep, because they can go into quote-unquote dormancy.
Sure. Okay, so let's break this one down. First off, all the limitations on spellcasting are in the Arcana. If the Arcana does not present a limitation, then it doesn't exist. For instance, time specifically calls out that without temporal sympathy, you can only affect things that are quote-unquote unchanged from their current self. So, for instance, people on a day-to-day basis aren't changed, but the person, well, I'm gonna break the fourth wall here. None of us are the same people we were before COVID. No. We've all had major changes, thought processes. We are different, so that at least is going to be some withstand. But who we were now compared to who we were in high school, in elementary school, when we were born, these are vastly different things. If you don't have temporal sympathy, you can't cast on those people. You can't cast back that far.
Yeah.
And you need a connection to that past self, similar to spatial sympathy, where you're using a representation of the person that you're casting on. This is the time of that person that you are casting on. So you need like a photograph of them when they were that time. So that alone provides you with a big limitation on, well, how far back can you go? It's like, can I zap baby Hitler in the cradle? Because that's always one of the fun ones. Answer is no. You don't have a connection to baby Hitler. You show up with that, maybe we'll talk. But still, not happening. Also, you need the subject. He's not around to cast this spell on. So, yeah.
I mean, I would like to see someone try and do that in a game, and then me be like, okay, the campaign has drastically changed.
Yep.
Now we are fighting ultra Ubermensch Hitler.
Because here's the trick. And this is one of the important things, because you have to live and continue through to the present to make this changes stick. That alone is the reason why you cannot go outside of your timeline. Because you literally have to catch back up. Listen, if you weren't around then, you can't be yourself at that age, you know. So those are the restrictions. So those tend to show up in the Arcana section themselves. They are not on the spells unless there's something unique about the spell. The other thing, well, do spells work on abyssal entities? The answer is yes. But there's going to probably be withstand and paradox and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, they totally work on, well, spells in a general sense do work on abyssal entities. But let's bring up Sleep of the Just, because I have that handy right here, which says the mage controls the subject's sleep cycle, allowing her to remain awake without ill effects or asleep without being roused for this spell's duration. Right there, it says that it controls the entity, the subject's sleep cycle. If there is no sleep cycle, what are you affecting? Now, that said, this is one of the big tricks about Mage, which is overly relying on the pre-written spells. Because now you want to get into, I want to make them fall asleep. Well, this creature isn't capable of falling asleep. I want to put it, I just want it to be unaware, or I want it to shut down. Okay, that sounds like you are applying a condition. Can you apply a condition with your Arcana? Well, let me go over to the practices, and notably at 2 dots. Where's this thing at?
Ruling?
Actually, no, I don't even want that. No, sorry. I got ahead of myself. Page 126. I'm jumping ahead because I know you've got this on your list. But Creative Thaumaturgy, starting on page 125, has a section talking about what you can do, determine the effect and the cost. Because now we're in Creative Thaumaturgy. We're not this golem or this entity that does not sleep. A spirit even does not sleep. They just have to spend essence to be active for another 24 hours. Anything like that. I want to shut it down. I'm going to apply a condition to it. Okay. Well, we come in here, we find a condition, and it brings up at 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot, 4 dot, technically not even 5 dots, because 5 dots is all sorts of other dumb stuff. It shows you what kind of condition you can apply to somebody. 2 dots can create most non-persistent, mundane conditions. Supernatural conditions such as soullessness and its stuff, or manifestation conditions with ephemeral things generally require a 3 dot spell. If you want to create something that's persistent, it needs to be patterning or unraveling 4 dots. Right there we have resolved. What are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to make them unaware and comatose. That sounds kind of like a condition or a tilt. Cool. Do you have 3 or 4 dots in an Arcana? And does that Arcana apply to what you're talking about? In this case, muddling their mind so that they stop paying attention to things. They just kind of drift off out of consciousness, because that's what you want for somebody going to sleep. That sounds reasonable. And now we move on with our lives rather than discussing Sleep of the Just, right?
Yeah. Now, if I were to try to make a vampire go into day sleep, would you say 3 dots to do that condition? Since it's a supernatural condition.
It is not a condition.
Oh, it is not a condition.
As far as I'm aware, vampire day sleep is a thing that they naturally do, right? And I don't believe it is a condition as listed in the back of the book, wherein they get beats from dealing with stuff, right? I'm checking right now.
Yes, but sometimes conditions don't get... There are things that behave like conditions but don't have the condition.
If you cannot resolve it or get beats from it happening, you should not treat it as a condition. In this particular case, day sleep is not listed as a condition. It is just a thing that happens. Similar to sleeping. Sleeping is not a condition for normal people. You do not get beats from things happening. Now, you might have other stuff. Lethargic is actually in here as a condition. Sleep.
What about unconsciousness? Is unconsciousness a condition? It's just when your health boxes are full up.
Right. No? You just fall. Let's see, where's tilts? Oh, they don't have tilt. Where is tilts at? Vampire 2E, you're letting me down. Let me see here if we have tilts. Do we have unconscious? No, we have arm rack, deprived, disabled. Actually, what is disabled? Nope, that's ability to walk. But no, knocked down and immobilized, things of that nature, stunned.
Insensate.
Those are all tilts. But if we're talking about, oh,
Yeah.
well, day sleep. Day sleep is something somebody naturally does. Falling asleep is something naturally does. That's not a condition. And inducing that would be something more natural. And that's not even a condition. That becomes ruling. Now, you need to have the right arcana for it. But yes, you could totally make a vampire move into day sleep. Probably need to do a clash of wills or pick a appropriate withstand. But yeah, actually, what would happen there? Extrapolating real quick, live DMing right now.
Yes.
I cast a spell. Not going to worry about the Arcana to send your vampire into day sleep. If I remember correctly, there's the ability to spend willpower or something similar to resist the urge to fall into day sleep.
Yes.
You do that. Now we have two effects happening. You want to stay awake, and you have done so using your mechanics, which is a supernatural effect, because you are a vampire. And I've cast a spell. These things are in confliction with each other. If my spell was more than temporary, if I said, oh, you go into day sleep and the duration is over, and you go, no, I don't. Okay, well, now you have resisted the day sleep. You are still up and active, and my spell isn't affecting you any longer. Then you just resist it and you shrug it off as like a weird yawn. But if it were continuing, now we have two supernatural effects that are conflicting with one another. Clash of Wills. Done.
Okay. That is good to know. I will bother you incessantly about this stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, hey, I'm a plug it. www.yeetinto.space. That's my Discord. That's the Occultist Anonymous Discord, really. We have a whole bunch of folks who will happily argue about rules, and we do so without gatekeeping. We will yell at you if you try to make stuff up, but bust out the books. We have a section for literally talking about this is the rules as presented by the books.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good place to go. I highly recommend it. I'm actually already there.
Yes.
And I have been one of those people that has just gotten into arguments.
Yep. I mean, everybody
Please
does
don't
it.
at me.
Everybody does it.
Okay. Next up on the charges, we have the greatest charge of them all. No, I don't know if it's the greatest one.
This one's up there.
It is creative thaumaturgy, which is essentially, in my opinion, giving a player the equivalent of a GM narrative ability.
Would you say that you give them the ability to warp reality based on their will?
Yes.
Yes. Creative Thaumaturgy is the most skipped section by most Mage players and their storytellers. Starts on 125, runs through 127. Live this. It literally walks you through the actual creation of a spell effect. Not a rote as they are presented in the following pages with all the Arcana, which are just example rotes. You can cast them as improvised spells, but they're effectively rotes. This allows you to know how to actually figure out what this spell is doing and whether or not you can cast it. And for instance, one of the big things that comes up, what damage? I'm going to use a 2-dot spell to do this, that, and the other, and that's going to cause damage to the target. Haha. And the answer is, I'm going to look and point right here. It says 3-dot spells inflict bashing damage, while 4-dot spells inflict lethal damage. You are trying to do bashing damage to this target with a 2-dot spell. Not happening.
You do something like, let me give an example. I use a spell to basically cause a rock to fall off of the top of a cliff or something onto the head of a player or a head of a character. Would that cause lethal bashing damage if I only have 2 dots?
You're talking about two different things. The spell
Mhm.
is cause a rock to fall. Cool,
Mhm.
you can do that. Sounds like a ruling spell to make a well, heck, with 1 dot you can compel a rock to start rolling downhill. With 2 dots you can make a rock roll uphill and therefore over the cliff and fall. Cool. Now I'm going to narratively figure out what actually happens. Very
Gravity.
likely, yeah, gravity is going to happen, and you're talking about what are the chances of that rock up there falling directly on that guy's head? That's going to be a question. Now, are you using matter? Maybe. With lodestone, you can draw things towards something. So yes, you might be able to do something. In which case, I'll reference falling rock damage in the core rulebook or something similar, and it may do some damage. But that is the limits there, right? You have to figure out what you're doing. Yes, you are allowed to make this rock roll. I, as the storyteller, am well within my rights to go. He hears a clatter, looks up, sees the rock coming, and moves to the side. Now that said,
Yeah.
giant boulder, because you took the time to take the scale and get that big rock and roll that down, you better believe I'm probably going to be like, that's probably going to squish a guy. That's going to hit him. That's going to at least do enough damage to inflict leg rack as he dives out of the way or something similar. I'm cool with that. If I want to outright kill somebody, you can do it with 2 dots of space. You cast ban, you blink them out of existence, and you let them suffocate. Does that suck? Yes. Mages are still scary, even at 2 dots. But if you say, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to inflict potency damage, that's a 3-dot spell.
Okay. As far as it goes with mortals, I'm always less inclined to give mortals the out than say a horror or some sort of splat or supernatural entity. Because when I learn demon, one of the things demon has a lot of are spells where it says if this is used against a mortal, that mortal's probably just dead. But if it's used against something that's more significant, it's not going to kill it instantly.
Yep.
And that's something I use in my games a lot of the time because I'm always like, mortals are always getting crapped on by supernaturals, irregardless of the type of supernatural.
They don't have Clash of Wills. They don't have they do have Withstand. And I guess technically you could have a Clash of Wills on mortals if they have a supernatural ability, but Clash of Wills only works on supernatural abilities because it's that clash of wills. And mages give them Withstand, but you're only talking about a few dots.
Yeah. It's always interesting to come up with these like rules for your game a little bit. Though I will say for creative thaumaturgy, I can't help but compare creative thaumaturgy to influence with ephemeral creatures, because influence is very similar. You have 5 dots of influence that you can get up to, and each dot of it increases the potency of that influence. So at the first influence dot, I believe you can increase or decrease.
Strengthen.
You have like strengthen it, and it's not until like 3 or 4 where you can actually create it, or 4 create it, and then 5 mass create.
Yep.
And so when I think of creative thaumaturgy, I immediately think of werewolf, because werewolf gets access to that, but it's very limited. And when I look at mage, I look at how unlimited it can be sometimes.
To a point.
If you were to compare them like side by side, which one's elemental in mage? Which arcana is elemental?
Forces usually.
Forces. Okay, so forces 1 versus a werewolf that got the influence fire 1. A werewolf who has influence fire can only affect fire, but mage that has has 1 dot of forces has all of them, all
Sure.
fire, water, earth, air, and probably a multitude that I can't even think of.
I
The
mean, it's
fifth,
your natural forces, but
the fifth element, boron.
the big trick here is werewolf has to spend some essence and rolls a stat. A mage now has to roll a similar stat, probably less because it's only a couple die, and now you're having to also deal with scale. Scale is not a thing that influence cares about. You just target the thing. So if you want to strengthen an existing fire, you just strengthen the fire. Well, what if it's a really big fire? I don't care. I'm strengthening the fire. Mage has to go, that's a big bonfire. I need to up my scale a little bit. Poor examples, but we're just going to stick with it.
I like it. I think it works.
But, and, you know, mages need to, like, if you want to do something, say, permanent, for mages, that's a big push. And then it's not permanent. Then it's just indefinite. But for, you know, to use the example, a werewolf could use their 5 dots of influence to permanently control, well, actually, I guess because it's 4 dots. So they could permanently strengthen a effect. You know, fire. That fire is now permanently hotter. Again, fire is a bad example, but
California is completely on fire now because of a werewolf.
No, boo. But to you know, influence, for instance, can shift anchors or resident conditions to open, and a werewolf or other ephemeral being could use influence, and if they have 5 dots of influence on a thing, they could make a permanent open condition. Mages go, well, yeah, I can make it indefinite, but all it takes is a sleeper walking by and it's going to start to fade, or another mage going, I don't like that, and dispelling it, but you've made it permanent, which is something that mages can't do.
I've never actually heard that. Having a sleeper encounter something that's permanent causes, like a spell that's permanent causes it to start to fade.
Indefinite, and they have to perceive it, but that's what dissonance is. A lot of people talk about quiescence, which is half of it, which is sleepers forget about magic. Dissonance is as soon as a sleeper perceives of a magic effect, you roll and see if it starts to degrade.
So if I break the leg of a sleeper and I make it persistent, they can perceive that they have lost, that they've broken their leg. But as they've perceived it, does that mean now it starts to...
It has to be obvious magic. So yes, if, for instance, you know, you brought it up before of, oh, I'm going to do leg rack to this guy and inflict this condition, and I'm going to set it at indefinite duration because I'm an asshole. Initially, that dissonance is going to kick in. And let me jump over here to the sleeper section so I make sure I'm discussing this correctly. End of a scene in which a sleeper witnesses obvious supernal magic, you roll their dice pool. Their integrity as a dice pool. And it's withstood by the spell's dots, or other different stuff depending on what supernal thing it's seeing, but for the spell. So the spell's dot, applying a tilt, we just discussed that, that's 2 dots. So it's their integrity withstood by, or in this case, reduced by, their die pool. And then on a dramatic failure, the phenomenon is unaffected. And the sleeper suffers a breaking point against integrity. So that's where you come up with, hey, where does this stuff happen if they don't notice it immediately, or breaking points happening later? This is where those dramatic failures. On a regular failure, phenomenon is unaffected. But you're talking about spells that cap out at 5, right? In this case, we're talking about 2 versus an integrity pool that ranges normally in like the 6 and 7s. So they're rolling a die pool of 5 dice. They're very likely to get a success. If the roll achieves successes beyond the phenomenon's withstand rating. Right. Flip that around. They're rolling their 7 dice, and they need to get more than 2 successes in this particular case. Spells, each success reduces spell factor by a level. Primary factor last to the minimum of lowest factor level of each spell factor table. So in other words, it'll start reducing down in scale and duration or potency depending on primary factor. If all factors have been reduced to a minimum, any further successes destroys the spell. So you take that poor security guard, he looks down and goes, the heck? I did nothing to cause this leg injury. I was standing and then suddenly it happened. I wasn't even mid-step. I didn't step off the curb weird, nothing. And now my leg is just in massive amounts of pain and I can't walk on it. Well, that's really weird. That's your first roll. Every scene thereafter, when they're reminded of this being, now, bear in mind, quiescence is going to kick in, so they're going to remember something weird happening to their leg, because that's going to fill in the gaps. But they go see the doctor because the wife goes, your leg is still hurting. The doctor looks at this, puts in an x-ray, and it's like, why is your leg weird? Dissonance is going to kick in again. And heaven help you if that doctor shares it with a couple nurses and another doctor, boom, 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 here's more dissonance. That indefinite duration spell, it's going to wither away.
And suddenly it fixes itself. Now this explains why my back pain hasn't been fixed at all.
Right.
I need to go to a doctor, get them to look at it, say there's nothing wrong, and then the spell goes away.
Over time, maybe, but you have to see multiple doctors about it because quiescence is going to kick in. But yep.
Multiple consultations. Show the X-ray to 1 million people.
Mm-hmm.
God, that is very close to, and I'm not even gonna like touch on this further than this sentence, but it reminds me of the technocracy from Mage the Ascension.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it is, yeah. But that's
I'm not
because of consensus instead of dissonance.
Dissonance, yeah. Consensus is something like I feel like is just a big rabbit hole where I've seen so many things on Reddit about it that I'm not, Mage the Ascension is not on trial here, people. It's Mage the Awakening.
Correct.
Okay, next one. We're getting close to the end of this. So next charge. I usually have a lot of in-game days between my sessions, such as days or weeks, which allows mages to regain mana a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an issue I've had alongside D&D as well when I do long stretches of time where it's like, it always seems like when the players go up against an encounter, they're always at their peak performance. There's no time to recruit. There is enough time to recuperate in between that.
Mm-hmm.
The players are always at their peak performance, and when they go up against something that's stronger, that's strong, they're always at the top of their
health,
game. They're always
got all their spell slots. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how do you deal with like the downtime between sessions, or do you not have that much downtime between?
I'm bad
sessions?
about going from day to day to minute, and it's very difficult to keep up with that. It's one of the reasons I had some mage burnout and I haven't run it for a little bit, but we'll be back soon. No, if you do the same thing for your vampires and say, oh yeah, you just pick up with full vitae. If you tell your guys, yeah, you're back to full plasm. If everybody's back at full willpower, then mages are going to be at full mana.
Okay.
And for telling stories, if you are concerned about that and you do want to go, you don't have time to refill, but you want to explain, well, what you've been doing. Well, the thing is, in that downtime, you probably cast some spells. You probably had to deal with some paradox, and you probably had to spend some mana to put down that paradox. And conveniently, you still have the same amount of mana that you had when we finished the last session.
That is a good way to think about it. I hadn't really thought of it that way, where if maybe have it so that like you're just like, okay, it's been It's been 2 weeks, but other stuff's been happening off camera.
I mean, as a mage, you're probably part of an order or a cabal, or you have various responsibilities that are going to require you to use your resources. Now that said, if somebody has a Hallow or something similar, guys have the cenotes, the vampires have their herds, right? These various sources of resources, that's where they can call on, hey, I have this merit that says I can get some of this stuff back. Then I'd be like, cool, all right, deduct X amount of mana from your Hallow, and you're good. But they need to spend that merit dot.
Yeah. That would be...
Maybe there's a way to get the merit dot, I should say.
Maybe there's a way of doing it, and this is just me spitballing here, a way of being like, okay, roll me 5 dice. Every failure on the dice is how much mana you've spent in the intervening time, or how much vitae you've spent.
Yep.
And then you can subtract your merit dots from Hollow and Herd from it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to handle that downtime. You could also simply give them, hey, you have one chance here to do your, I think it's a wits plus composure roll or gnosis plus. Can't quite remember how one meditates at a Hallow to get mana back, but you get one roll of that real quick. That's what you've regained from your Hallow, rather than just giving it to them. Technically, over the time, they probably could have had time, but if you're like, hang on, I need to wear your resources down, that's a way to do it. Alternatively, yeah, you just deal with the fact that when you start up a new chapter, a new thing is happening, everybody's back up and is rested. But if you want to be clear, oh, you guys haven't had time. There's been a lot of stuff you've been doing in your downtime that we talked about off screen before we got back to the table here. So you're all busy doing that stuff. You haven't had time to recuperate mana and stuff like that. And if the mage goes, but I need more mana, well, you can scour real quick and lower one of your attributes and get some mana right now. Or if you have a legacy, you can use an oblation and go ahead and do that to get up a point of mana real quick.
That makes sense. It's there are a lot of avenues to get those resources back for some splats. Other splats don't have it as good. I will always cry a bit about Demon and how they have to get their Aether back. Do you know that?
Don't know it off the top of my head, but Deviant is right there with you. Deviants have a bad time.
What resource do they spend when they cast?
They just have to deal with instability and the fact that they're breaking down, and if they haven't done stuff to go beat up the source of their anger, or if they haven't protected their close loved ones, instability builds up and builds up. Yeah.
I actually have a lot of Deviant players now, and for the life of me, for a long time, I was thinking, man, they're not dealing with instability that much. Like they always seem to be at like a good level of instability, not taking much of it. Like they take, I think, one minor instability at the end of a session, I think, just if they've used a variant at all. And then it wasn't until like my second to last session where someone was like casting the same variant multiple times, and then all of a sudden they were stacking instability like hell, and I was like, oh, that's bad.
Yep.
That's gonna be rough to heal up.
Deviants have it rough.
And then we're down to the last charge, the final charge, the personal charge that people have talked to me about and still don't understand why I have this issue. And I've played with mummies and demons in my games. And I've had a lot of players. But while the abilities for mummy and demons are powerful, they're usually very narrow and specific in what they do, while mage powers are very powerful and very general, with the little downsides that they have. I mean, little being paradox, and we've already gone over that, how it's actually a bigger issue than what it first appears. But I've actually had more players complain to me about mages than mummies and demons.
Mm-hmm.
And the only players who've complained to me about mummies were the mage players, because mummies can get Rebuke the Vizier,
Mm-hmm.
which is just one ability.
Yep. But it's a scary ability, and it really does. It literally messes with sorcerers and magic casters. Anybody who really does any supernatural magic, I will say.
Yes.
And the answer is actually, yeah, you're 100% correct. There are very little downsides to mages. A lot of their drawbacks are mechanically very soft and stuff that they can handle. The trick is they're a little on the squishy side. Again, you have to be a prepared mage, and you have if you're caught out, you're probably kind of vulnerable. And yes, oh well, a mage can teleport away. Yes, a mage who has 4 dots in space. As soon as they teleport away, you go, cool. Tick that mark on the board and try a new avenue to kill them. You know that they can teleport. How are they with dealing with ghosts? You know, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, the werewolf versus mage. You know, the werewolf should just tear up a mage. Well, yeah, nine times out of 10, probably. But if you find out that said mage is not able to see spirits,
Yeah.
send a spirit in Twilight who has any number of Numina and kill them.
Yeah.
Like, and that mage goes, I'm dying. What is killing me? I'm dead. Well, can't you use whatever? No, you can't. The spirit has killed you because you don't have dots of spirit.
I actually have this question. This came up because my players were very adamant about this at one point. They went up against some spirits that were in Twilight, and the spirits were casting Numina at them from Twilight.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my players said, no, they can't do that. They need to be manifested in order to affect the material realm. And I'm like, I don't think there's anything in the book that says they have to have that.
So, step 1, they are manifested. They're using the Twilight manifestation. But if you're wanting to, you know, now, because if they're going to throw the, well, actually at you, you get to hit them back with, well, actually, they are manifested. The other answer is, no, you mean materialize? No, and many spirits don't have the materialize manifestation. They can still cast their Numina. Nothing says that they can't. I'm going to jump over here to Numina real quick.
Yeah.
Let's see here. No, it doesn't say anything about that.
Yeah. And that's something I had to have a conversation where I'm like, okay, you have a ghost and they're haunting a house, and they're throwing stuff around the room and everything, like things are going off the wall because they have the telekinesis Numina. That they don't have to manifest for that. Why would they manifest for that? They're moving things around. They're doing the ghost thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did I cut you off? I thought I cut
you're
you
good.
off.
I'm reading over some stuff to make sure I do things correctly. But yes, attacks pass through Twilight beings. They don't seem to exist. They are made of ephemera. They pass right through. Let's see. Things are out of phase with one another. Okay, nothing here says anything about Numina not working. And there's this wonderful yeah. I guess that's fair. They can't roll power plus finesse to attack you physically. Their body is not there. There's nothing, however, keeping them from using the blast Numina, which gives them a range of 10 yards per dot of power, and there's no range penalties because there's no short, medium range. It's just this is the range. Yeah. Now they do have to spend
Essence?
Oh, you know what? They do have to do essence, but that only allows them to increase the lethality. By default, no, they can just blast you with energy. Just rolling,
Man.
yep, power plus finesse as a firearm. Now that does mean, okay, my mage can dodge bullets if he has space armor, but he can't see. So, well, actually, we do know that adds defense, which does work on surprise attacks. But that's just defense. I guess you can take the dodge action, except dodge action calls out, I believe you have to be able to see your attackers. But yeah, there are ways to kill mages. They're super squishy. A lot of people talk about how scary mages are. Hi, have you seen a Geist? You can kill him and he comes back.
I have seen mages be very. This is something that I don't know why it happened, but so I had a mage. They weren't a Thyrsus. I don't believe they had spirit dots at all. But when they went up against a manifested spirit, they were like, materialized.
Mm-hmm.
Materialized spirit. Vocab, it always hurts me. A materialized spirit, they were like, okay, I cast this spell to do damage to them, mind spell or what have you, and managed to like just wipe the floor with it. And then I hear from one of my other GMs, because we have multiple GMs on this server, they went up and they had them go up against abyssal entities, and suddenly the mage was like, oh no, abyssal entities, my one weakness, and like collapsed. And I'm like, what special thing did it have? And the GM just said to me, it didn't have anything like special. He could have done the same thing he did to the spirit, but psychologically, he thinks abyssal entity. He's like, oh, this is the antithesis of a mage or something. I don't know.
They are problems, and you do not want to overreach near them because they are healed by it and various other bonuses it gets from Paradox. But also, just
where does it say they're healed by it?
Specifically, it mentions it with dissonance and there's a couple other things, but but also, just for those of you at home who are like, I need to figure out how to deal with a mage, find you, and by find I mean make a spirit that has the reaching manifestation, sit them on the other side of the gauntlet, spend one essence, and then blast them to bits.
Does blast have reach? I don't think blast has reach.
No. That part doesn't matter. Reaching is a materialization. Once they do so, they're able to use influence and Numina to affect the other side of the gauntlet.
Then why do some Numina have the reach characteristic? If you look at Firestarter,
yes, Numina with R next to the name are usable in conjunction with the reaching condition. Okay.
So yes. Blast doesn't have that.
No, Blast doesn't have that. Instead, you would Firestart, Entropic Decay. Because like Entropic Decay literally could each success on the activation roll inflicts 1 point of lethal damage. Hey, congratulations, guys. This creature is spending 1 essence to be attacking across the gauntlet, and then 3 points every activation of Entropic Decay. They get to penalize the rule by their stamina, but this is a tiny little mage who maybe has 5 stamina, and if you're a decently sized spirit, you're throwing, I don't know, what? Let's say 10 dice on your activation to Entropic Decay. Yeah, you'll... There's so many ways you can kill a mage. You just got to think outside the box. And notably, study your target. As you mentioned earlier, Kincaid with a sniper rifle from a mile away.
Yes, definitely. There is the what was it? it was someone recently on the subreddit, White Wolf subreddit, asked, how do vampires deal with mages? And I came up with an idea, and I'm not even sure if it will work, but it was this the uh the issue I think mages have a lot of the time is dealing with a lot of targets all at once, but the problem also is stag stagnating not stagnating staggering them in a way that the the mages can affect maybe the building. Like one of my mage players used a spell to cause all the police in an area to run away because the police were staking out a museum. So he casted a spell that was a reach for the entire city block or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these police officers just sort of left their posts. And we had to he couldn't he did it to the city block, but he didn't want to do it to the building because he needed the people who were in the building to stay in the building.
Mm-hmm.
So while the police left, he couldn't do the thing to the people in the building. So he had to do all these like weird calculations and things to do it to that. Where I also think like if you're a vampire and you want to protect your domain from mages, have a couple blood dolls around. Blood dolls aren't
Have lots of sleepers. Yep.
Yeah, blood dolls aren't supernatural at all, so they are sleepers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ghouls
unlike the
technically
ghouls,
are sleepers.
well, there isn't there a thing where if you have a supernatural merit, you're considered a sleepwalker?
Mm-hmm. Close. If you have a supernatural, now, I mean, you may be catching me out here, but where are we at definitions? Sleepwalkers. Aha. Sleepwalker merit exists. This merit is not necessary for a character with any other supernatural merit involving an internal power or any supernatural template. Ghouls do not have internal power. They have power granted to them by vampires. Now, this is definitely something to bring up with your community, whoever you're playing with, and clarify what everybody thinks about that. Because ghouls technically don't. Now, actually, let me jump over here to ghouls real quick.
They do get a discipline, don't they?
That is exactly what I'm checking on. Blah 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 blah. Create a thing. Actually, you may be changed. I'm double checking what happens when you run out of. There we go. When you don't get your fix, you become deprived. Then you speed up to end this. Blah 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 blah. Oh, yep. So ghouls would be sleepwalkers because a ghoul in withdrawal cannot use any disciplines, even those that do not cost vitae or have, or which have persistent effects, but retains knowledge of them if his withdrawal ends. In other words, he may kick the habit, but he still has the discipline. So yes, and because they can learn discipline. So yes, actually ghouls would be sleepwalkers. So yeah, blood bonded, blood dolls, and stuff like that. And I think that was the misconception I had, because ghouls are an active thing as opposed to somebody who's just blood bonded and has drank your blood, because you have to spend the willpower point to make somebody a ghoul, as opposed to somebody who's just fed from your blood.
Oh, okay. I always thought the ghouls were the blood bonding a human was always made a ghoul, but that makes that's interesting. I never knew that.
Yep. Yeah, you have to invest it with a point of willpower. Yeah,
but
which basically gives them a minor template. Same thing actually would then, because that's how wolf-blooded are. Because they have tells and they have a supernatural power that is from themselves. But yeah, this basically, once you get that willpower dot, and technically, yeah, that's true, because you also have blood potency 0 as a ghoul. So yeah, ghouls count as sleepwalkers.
Okay. And when it comes to like this trying to fight a mage as a splat. I always think of like the like there the, I had players go up against the host in from Werewolf,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing the mage player asked was, were any of the people the hosts were feeding on still alive? And I said, no, no, they're all dead. And he said, okay. And he cast his giant
Mm-hmm.
mage nuke right on that area and just wiped the floor with all the hosts there. And I
Now,
was like,
that said, I'll be honest. If I'm
"Mhm,
playing a mage and I'm playing my kind of the one character I've people have seen me play, Drifter, who is a silver ladder guy, and he's pretty he can be a little rough. There's a couple sleepers. It's very unfortunate. I'm still going to zap everything, and oh no, it's obvious magic.
mhm."
Yes, I will have one paradox. I will probably have to roll an active hubris after this. Very unfortunate, but I'm going to get rid of that thing. Because
Yeah,
again, it's paradox is not there to stop you, it is to give a cost. Right? Paradox should not
yeah,
stop mages. Throw sleepers in the way. It at max, they're gonna spend some mana. Okay,
yeah.
that's why we started them with the full supply of mana for the day.
I do find it a little bit weird that additional sleepers don't increase the chance of paradox.
They do, but they don't add additional die.
Okay, what do you mean by
They apply a
that?
dice trick. So, bum, 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 bum. Go back up to Paradox. Multiple sleeper witnesses, page 115. Multiple sleeper witnesses do not add paradox dice, but increases the chance of a paradox occurring. Literally, what you just said. If a few sleepers witness a spell cast, the paradox roll gets a 9 again quality. A large group grants the paradox roll the 8 again quality, and a full crowd grants the paradox roll the rote quality.
If you reduce it though down to a chance die, those conditions can't apply though, right? I don't think
I
you can.
technically no, you can't have a chance die and rote quality. I agree, but that's not what we're talking about here. Paradox is
Okay.
paradox wisdom. Excuse me. I'll get there. Mana will reduce down. And let me see here. Where's this thing at? Da, 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 da. Also, don't forget, mana is per turn. So if you have bigger pools, don't forget to make your mage take longer to cast. Um, but
Mhm.
it allows them to reduce it down to ba, 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 ba.
That's something I always need to remember is if something costs more than just one and you're a level 1 character equivalent or starting character, you need to spend those multiple turns. I always sort of hand waved it away, and that's supposed to be a limiting factor.
Now it's not usually too limiting, but yes. So yeah. Once a single paradox die is added to the paradox pool, storyteller must check for the possibility of paradox, even if other factors reduce the paradox dice to a chance die, i.e., dedicated magical tools and mana. But after that, okay, good job. You've reduced it down to a chance die. Then I start counting sleepers. Then
Oh,
I may bump it up from a chance die. Well, there's a couple sleepers. It's going to get 9 again now. Oh, now it's got 8 again because it's a big group. Full crowd, it's a rote quality. It's rote quality on one die. Your mage, I'm gonna look right at y'all. The mage can go cry because all that's going to happen is congratulations, you may chain together 3 or 4 10 agains because of the rote quality. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Maybe you'll get 3 or 4 successes. Roll your 6 to 7 wisdom and contain the stupid thing.
exactly.
You're do not mages, don't be afraid of paradox. Stop doing that because you're just making the game worse for yourself. And for everybody else, if you're spending any amount of time arguing whether or not sleepers can see you and whether or not this is overreaching and paradox and then blah 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 blah, my dude, go watch the 160 episodes of The Rookery. They didn't even argue much about paradox, and paradox barely ever affected stuff. And when it did, it's interesting because now if you're containing it, now you have an abyssal condition, and that's going to mess up your spells in interesting and fun ways. And they're really not difficult to deal with. It might mean that, oh, you know what? I now have an abyssal condition, and I need to switch to the gun arcana. Okay. Like, it's fine. I promise.
Man, I need the sleep 9 hours or 8 hours a day arcana.
Yep. Like, D&D, it's why we love it. Everybody gets to hang out with people, you get to save people, and get a long rest and wake refreshed. Fantasy. Yes.
Fantasy. Man, these people with their unrealistic fantasies.
Yep.
Oh, God. So I think that is all of the charges. That is every charge I have. I will say there are some things that I purposefully didn't put on this list, mainly because one, I think they are either very interesting for a narrative standpoint, and the narrative trumps the breaking that it could be, such as I believe you mentioned them, legacies, right?
Oh, legacies,
Before?
all sorts of fun. And here's the big thing I will bring up for every storyteller out there who's like, mages are OP. Mages are OP the same way your wizard and your sorcerer and your cleric and your druid are OP in D&D. If you set up the situation where they have long rests and they can be relaxed and super cool about everything, of course they're OP. But all it takes is introduce another mage. To quote the great Qui-Gon Jinn, there's always a bigger fish. There's always another mage who's going, I don't like what you're doing right now. And very, very often, the classic TTRPG answer to a problem of authority is, well, I'm going to try and kill them. Okay, cool. I'm going to say you get to kill them because you got the drop on them. Congratulations, you now have a murder charge with mages who can do things across infinite distances and across time. You may commit that murder and then find yourself, wait, where am I? Why am I suddenly in this cell being talked to by several men in masks who want to talk to me about poor choices I make in the future? These things can happen. You think DMs in D&D going, and then the Tarrasque attacks is some bullshit. Wait till you see what a storyteller can do. And it ain't bullshit. It's just within the realm that you live in.
I will always say to any GMs out here that are switching from Dungeons and Dragons to Chronicles of Darkness, never worry about your players having like illegal firearms or anything like that in game, specifically in game, because having a character who has a military grade automatic weapon in game, you're just like, okay, they have this. How are you carrying it around without the police starting to question why you have this?
Yep.
How are you firing it without the police arriving on the scene? Because this stuff isn't like a fantasy world where the nearest town is 50 miles away and you have to deal with the authority of the frontier, essentially. This is a game set usually in modern day. It doesn't have to be. And the modern day society has rules.
Modern society has rules and is secretly being ruled by vampires, mages, influenced by werewolves, and any number of other stuff. Don't even get me started on what the God Machine and its infrastructure might be doing.
It can be very interesting though to take these like overpowered weapons or what we would consider overpowered weapons and then bringing them into the hedge or bringing them into the underworld. And then you see how, oh, I have a fully automatic rifle, but these ghosts are taking bashing damage from the bullets because they're dead.
The vampires are laughing it off. Yeah. There's a lot of that. The vampires are dodging bullets. Yeah. There's always a bigger fish, and especially people who get hung up on the whole werewolf versus mage fight thing, because that's always the big gratuitous one. That's the jock versus the nerd fight, right? And the jock wins every time. No, the mage wins every time. So the answer is, why are they fighting? If you don't answer that question, literally Chronicles of Darkness starts with, in combat, determine what everybody wants. And you're not fighting to the death 90% of the time. What do people
Unless you're
want?
playing with my players.
Yeah, I mean, and that is some of the defaults of, oh, this is a big bad scary monster. Okay, yeah, we're fighting to the death. But werewolf and mage, nah, they're gonna throw a couple hits at each other and then go, all right, hang on, what's going on here? But throwing stuff into the white room, throwing things into a vacuum, it's not fun. Don't do that. And for mages specifically, coming from very personal experience, it's societal pressure and the acts of their own hubris that should be the star antagonist. The mages are their own worst enemies. Like, oh yeah, I can wish into existence lottery tickets and money. Cool. What's that do for you? What's that get you? Right? It might ease off some stuff, but you still have the lie and the exarchs and the seers of the throne looming over you going, hey, we don't care for your altruistic activity. We need to put a stop to that. And those ones are definitely A-okay, just killing you. Yeah. Or, the Pentacles Interfector, who specifically has a mask and a nerd spell for ripping your awakened soul out of your body. Trust me, you're not that big of a problem. And that's not even talking about archmages. Just sit down,
don't even get me started about that. So we've got to the end of all the charges. Now we need the verdict.
Oh yeah.
And who is the jury in this regard? The jury is you, the audience, right there. You decide whether Mage is found guilty for being an OP pile of crap that I have to deal with, or if it is, and I'll let you do your.
I mean, no, Mage is an OP pile of crap.
But you don't have to worry about it,
right? Yeah. I'll be honest. The way I want to say in the comments, let us know if we changed your mind one way or another. Hey, Mage is problematic, or hey, I can see Mage is better. Put your vote in. Let us know. This is going to be on Corbin's channel, but I'm definitely going to be lurking around in the comments here. I want to know, did this on my end make you feel like, oh, hey, Mage is not that bad? Because let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's what this video was really about.
It was.
Yeah. And if you do have other concerns, questions like, wait, how do I handle this thing? I have somebody who wants to run Mage, and I don't know what I'm getting into, or one of my players wants to play a Mage. What do I do? We got Discord. Like I said, my Discord's there. We do a lot of stuff, but we are very happy to talk about Mage. That's kind of our bread and butter, even though we haven't touched it in 6 months. But yeah, or in the comments section, sure, go for it.
And I will say that this conversation has definitely made me feel a lot better about Mage. It has opened my eyes to things I didn't know about. And the reason I actually contacted you for this was because I got a lot of comments on that tier list video saying, "Why did you put Mage in the hate category?" And I feel I'm considering moving it up from the hate to
And let's be honest,
to the...
it's a-okay to hate on a splat. It's okay to not enjoy it. There's a lot of people who hate on Beast, for instance. And I'll be honest, Beast has a lot of problems, but there's a lot of good in it. And here's the really important thing, and I'm gonna say this. It's okay to change the game so you like it better. Nobody's gonna show up to your door and kick it down and be the fun police. Work together. It's a playing game. You don't need to win this. And I'll be honest, as I know you're out there, mages, you don't have to win. Mage is a lot more fun if you make bad decisions, if you make mistakes and have to deal with the consequences. It's far more interesting. I promise you will burn out on Mage if you get to do everything that you want.
I feel really good about the video, and I hope I can cut down the 3.5, maybe 4 hours of
Well, actually, that
video
reminds
and
me,
audio.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay, stop recording.